The stars looked wrong to Commander Jake Harrison as he stared through the bridge viewport of the UHS Vengeance. 347 years had passed since his ship chased that alien scout through what the crew now called the Nightmare Tunnel. But to Jake and his 42 crew members, it felt like only months had gone by. The dimensional rift behind them sealed with a sound like thunder in space, something that should have been impossible. Jake rubbed his eyes and looked again at the star charts on his command screen. Everything was different, shifted, like someone had moved all the furniture in a familiar room while he slept. "Captain Bennett, are you seeing this?" Jake called to his second-in-command. Lisa Bennett stood at the tactical station, her face pale as she studied the readings flooding their sensors. "Sir, I'm picking up massive energy signatures throughout the system," she reported. "These aren't human designs. The orbital platforms around Earth are completely alien in origin." Navigation Officer Amy Johnson looked up from her console with confusion written across her young face. "Commander, I'm reading over 200 alien ships in Earth's vicinity. They're not attacking each other. They're working together." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. When the Vengeance had pursued that alien scout ship through the unstable wormhole, Earth had been preparing for humanity's first major push into galactic space. They had 36 colonies, a growing fleet, and dreams of taking their place among the stars as equals to any alien species they might encounter. "Take us to the edge of the system," Jake ordered. "Keep us dark and quiet. I want to know what happened here before we announce ourselves." Chief Engineer Ryan Cooper's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Commander, something strange is happening down here. The engines are running more efficiently than they should be. Power output is up 30% and I haven't touched anything." "Later, Ryan," Jake said, though he filed the information away. Strange things had been happening to the ship and crew ever since they emerged from that place between dimensions. He had noticed his own reflexes were sharper, his thinking clearer. The crew seemed more coordinated too, like they could anticipate each other's actions. Dr. Kelly Adams appeared on the bridge, her medical scanner in hand. "Commander, I need to speak with you privately. The readings I'm getting from the crew are impossible." "Not now, Doc," Jake said firmly. "Amy, what can you tell me about those ships?" Amy's fingers moved across her console with fluid precision that seemed almost inhuman. "I'm identifying 7 different alien species represented in the fleet. The largest group appears to be reptilian, based on the ship designs. There are also insectoid vessels, some kind of crystalline structures, and others I can't classify." Communications Officer Grace Turner suddenly straightened at her station. "Sir, I'm intercepting transmissions. It's going to take me some time to decode them, but I'm picking up what sounds like routine patrol chatter. They're not on high alert. This looks like a permanent occupation force." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "Occupation force? Earth was occupied. How is that possible?" Lisa Bennett asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. "When we left, humanity had the strongest fleet in known space. Our technology was superior to anything we'd encountered." 347 years, Jake said quietly. "A lot can change in that time." Weapons Specialist Dan Murphy had been silent at his console, but now he spoke up with grim certainty. "Commander, I'm detecting weapon signatures I don't recognize. Energy outputs that dwarf anything in our databases. Whatever happened here, humanity didn't win." Jake stood and walked to the center of the bridge. His crew looked at him with trust and confidence that he wasn't sure he deserved. They had followed him into the unknown, and now they had returned to find their world enslaved. "Grace, keep working on those transmissions," he ordered. "I want to know everything you can learn about what's happening down there. Amy, plot a course that keeps us hidden behind the outer planets while we gather intelligence." "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "we need to consider the possibility that there are no other human ships left. The Vengeance might be all that's left of Earth's fleet." The thought had occurred to Jake, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that chilled him. 43 people against what looked like the combined military might of multiple alien species. The odds were impossible, even with whatever changes had happened to them during their journey through the void. "Dan, I want a full weapons diagnostic," Jake said. "Ryan, same for the engines and defensive systems. If we're going to do anything about this situation, I need to know exactly what we're working with." As his crew bent to their tasks, Jake found himself studying each of them more carefully. Amy's movements at her console were too precise, too fast. Grace seemed to be processing the alien transmissions at an impossible rate. Dan's tactical assessments were coming with a speed and accuracy that went beyond human capability. Whatever had happened to them in that place between dimensions, they were no longer entirely human. The question was whether that would be enough. "Commander," Grace called out suddenly, "I've broken through their communications encryption. The news isn't good." Jake walked over to her station. "Tell me." "The occupation has been in place for over 2 centuries, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Earth surrendered after less than a year of fighting. The human population has been reduced to approximately 3 billion, scattered across labor colonies throughout this sector of space." "Labor colonies," Lisa repeated flatly. "They turned us into slaves." "It gets worse," Grace continued. "The alien coalition calls itself the hegemony. They've classified humanity as a servant species. No rights, no representation, no hope of advancement. We're property." Jake felt something stir inside him, something that hadn't been there before their journey through the void. It wasn't just anger, though fury was part of it. It was a cold certainty that radiated outward from somewhere deep in his chest. "Sir?" Ryan's voice came over the intercom again. "You need to see this. The ship's hull is regenerating damage we took during our passage through the dimensional rift. It's healing itself." Jake looked around at his crew, seeing his own transformation reflected in their faces. They had returned to find their species enslaved, but they were no longer the same humans who had left Earth centuries ago. The void between dimensions had changed them, enhanced them in ways they were only beginning to understand. "Lisa," he said quietly, "take a team and gather intelligence on the lunar command station. I want to know everything about how they defeated us and how they're controlling the human population." "What are you planning, Jake?" she asked. Jake Harrison looked out at the alien fleet occupying his home system and felt that strange new certainty burning brighter in his chest. "I'm planning to remind the galaxy why they used to fear humanity. And then I'm going to show them what we've become." The changes started small, but they were impossible to ignore. Amy Johnson discovered it first when she sat down at her navigation console 3 days after their return. Her fingers moved across the controls, and suddenly the ship's computer systems opened up to her mind like a door she had never known existed. "Commander," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "I can see the entire navigation grid in my head. I don't need the screens anymore." Jake Harrison turned from his command chair to watch as Amy closed her eyes and continued working her console with perfect precision. The star charts on the main display shifted and updated faster than any human should have been able to process them. Dr. Kelly Adams rushed onto the bridge with her medical scanner. "Commander, we need to talk. The cellular scans I've been running on the crew show changes at the quantum level. Our DNA has been altered in ways that shouldn't be possible." Before Jake could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Dan Murphy's hands flew over his weapons console, but his movements were too fast, too fluid. "Hegemony Patrol, 3 ships incoming. They must have detected our sensor sweeps." "Red alert," Jake ordered, feeling his mind suddenly expand in ways he couldn't explain. He could see the approaching battle like a chess game. Every possible move and countermove laid out before him. All hands to battle stations. The 3 alien ships were sleek reptilian designs twice the size of the Vengeance. Their weapons powered up as they closed the distance, energy readings that should have meant certain death for the human vessel. "They're hailing us," Grace Turner reported, then paused with confusion. "Wait, I'm not just hearing their transmission. I can see their computer systems. I'm inside their network somehow." "Shields up," Lisa Bennett called from Tactical, then stopped and stared at her readings. "Jake, our defensive screens are showing power levels that are impossible. We're generating more energy than our reactors should be capable of producing." The first alien ship fired, sending a brilliant green energy beam toward the Vengeance. Jake watched it approach and somehow knew exactly when and where it would strike. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. But Amy was already moving the ship before the words left his mouth. The beam passed harmlessly through space where they had been moments before. Dan Murphy's hands moved across his weapons console like he was playing music, and the Vengeance's guns spoke in response. The effect was devastating. The energy bolts that lashed out from their ship cut through the alien vessel's shields like they weren't there. The hull of the reptilian ship buckled and tore, atmosphere venting into space as secondary explosions rippled along its length. "Impossible," Dan breathed, staring at his readings. "Our weapons are operating at 3 times normal efficiency. The power output doesn't match anything in our technical manuals. The second alien ship tried to flank them, but Jake could see its movement before it started. Amy, bring us around. Dan, target their engine section. Amy's response was instantaneous, the ship moving as if it were an extension of her own body. Dan's targeting was perfect, his shots finding weak points in the alien ship's hull that he shouldn't have been able to identify. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, 3 hegemony vessels drifted dead in space, their crews either deceased or fleeing in escape pods. The Vengeance hadn't taken a single hit. How is this possible? Lisa asked, her voice filled with wonder and fear. We just destroyed ships that outgunned us 5-1. Dr. Adams was scanning the bridge crew with her medical equipment, her eyes wide with amazement. Your neural activity is off the charts. All of you are processing information and reacting at speeds that are beyond human capability. Ryan Cooper's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Commander, you need to see this. The ship's hull is adapting. Where we took minor damage from debris, new armor plating is growing over the scratches. The metal is actually healing itself. Jake stood up from his command chair, feeling the strange new awareness that had awakened during the battle. He could sense his crew's thoughts, not reading their minds exactly, but understanding their intentions and reactions in perfect clarity. Grace, what did you learn from their computer systems? He asked. Grace Turner looked up from her console, her eyes still glowing faintly with an inner light. I downloaded their patrol routes, communication protocols, and identification codes. But Jake, I also saw something else. They have prisoners. Human prisoners? A transport ship full of them, heading for a mining colony in the next system. The manifest shows over 200 people, including families with children. The cold fury that Jake had felt when they first discovered Earth's occupation flared brighter. How long until they reach the colony? 6 hours at their current speed. Jake looked around at his transformed crew. Amy sat at her console with her eyes closed, somehow piloting the ship through direct mental connection. Dan was studying weapons configurations that seemed to appear in his mind without reference to any manual. Grace continued to monitor alien communications through what appeared to be pure thought. They were no longer human in the traditional sense, but they were still the protectors of humanity. Perhaps they were something more than human now, something that could actually fight back against the forces that had enslaved their species. Set course for intercept, Jake ordered. We're going to rescue those prisoners. Sir, Lisa said carefully, we don't know the full extent of our capabilities yet. Shouldn't we be cautious about engaging more enemy forces? Jake felt that expanding awareness touched something deeper, something that connected him to the ship itself and to the strange space they had traveled through to get here. The Vengeance wasn't just a warship anymore. It was becoming something unprecedented, a fusion of human determination and cosmic enhancement that defied all known science. The aliens have held our people in chains for centuries, he said quietly. They've forgotten what humanity is capable of when we're pushed too far. It's time we reminded them. The ship turned toward the transport convoy, its hull gleaming with new metallic growth that pulsed with inner energy. Behind them, the wreckage of 3 hegemony vessels drifted in space, the first casualties in what would become known as humanity's second war for independence. But this time, humanity would not be fighting alone. They would have weapons and abilities that the galaxy had never seen before, gifts from the void between dimensions that would transform the balance of power forever. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his impossible ship, surrounded by his enhanced crew, and felt the future shifting around them like a living thing. The hegemony had made humanity into slaves, but they had not destroyed the human spirit. Now that spirit had returned, changed and empowered beyond all recognition, ready to reclaim what had been stolen, and to show the galaxy that humanity would never kneel again. The hegemony transport convoy never saw them coming. Jake Harrison watched through the bridge viewport as the Vengeance materialized from the darkness of space, like a predator emerging from deep water. The 3 escort ships were already powering their weapons when Amy Johnson's enhanced reflexes brought them within striking distance. Disable the escorts but leave the transport intact, Jake ordered. We need those prisoners alive. Dan Murphy's hands moved across his weapons console with impossible speed. The Vengeance's guns fired in perfect sequence, each shot calculated to cripple rather than destroy. The alien escort ships found their engines dead, and their weapons offline within moments. Transport is attempting to send a distress signal, Grace Turner reported, her consciousness somehow linked directly to the enemy's communication systems. Signal blocked and their navigation is now under my control. Jake felt the familiar expansion of awareness that came with combat situations now. He could see the entire battle space in his mind, every ship movement and energy signature mapped out in perfect detail. But there was something else, something deeper calling to him from inside the transport vessel. Life signs? He asked. Dr. Kelly Adams ran her enhanced medical scanners across the enemy ships. 237 humans aboard the transport. They're alive but showing signs of malnutrition and medical neglect. The alien crews are reptilian, same species as the ships we fought earlier. Board the transport, Jake decided. Lisa, take a team and secure the prisoners. Grace, keep their systems locked down. Lisa Bennett nodded and headed for the airlock with 6 crew members. Jake watched her move and noticed the fluid precision that now characterized all their actions. Whatever the void between dimensions had done to them, it had enhanced not just their mental capabilities but their physical coordination as well. The boarding action took less than 20 minutes. The reptilian guards found themselves facing humans who moved like ghosts through their corridors, anticipating every defensive position and counterattack before they could organize resistance. Transport secured. Lisa's voice came over the comm system. Jake, you need to see this. Jake made his way to the transport ship through the connecting airlock. What he found there made the cold fury in his chest burn even brighter. The human prisoners were packed into cargo holds like livestock. Men and women and children all wearing the same gray uniforms marked with alien symbols. An elderly man with intelligent eyes stepped forward from the group. Are you human? He asked with disbelief in his voice. Real humans, not collaborators. We're human, Jake confirmed. What's your name? Paul Martinez. I was a historian on Earth before the conquest. They've had us working the mining platforms in the Epsilon sector for 15 years. His eyes studied Jake's uniform with growing amazement. That's a pre-war Earth fleet insignia. How is that possible? Jake looked around at the frightened faces surrounding them. Children who had never seen Earth. Adults who had spent their entire lives as slaves to alien masters. We've been away for a long time. Tell me what happened to humanity. Paul's expression grew dark. They came in force 300 years ago, 7 species working together. They called themselves the Hegemony Coalition. Our fleet fought bravely, but their technology was superior. When they threatened to destroy every city on Earth, the government surrendered. What happened to our colonies? Overrun within months. The Hegemony transported the surviving population to work camps throughout their territory. We mine rare metals, construct their buildings, serve in their factories. They treat us like we're barely intelligent animals. Jake felt something shift inside him as he listened to Paul's words. The enhancement from the void wasn't just changing his body and mind. It was awakening something primal, something that connected him to every human who had ever fought for freedom. That ends now, he said quietly. They transferred the rescued prisoners to the Vengeance, where Dr. Adams began treating their injuries and malnutrition. Jake gathered his senior officers in the briefing room to plan their next move. The Hegemony has 37 labor camps in this sector alone, Paul Martinez reported, having been invited to share his knowledge. Over 1 million humans in total, working under conditions that kill approximately 10% of the population each year. Ryan Cooper looked up from his engineering reports. Commander, the ship continues to evolve. Our power generation has increased another 20%, and I'm detecting new weapon systems that weren't there yesterday. It's like the Vengeance is adapting to our needs. The same thing is happening to us, Dr. Adams added. The crew's enhancements are accelerating. Sam Foster in engineering can now repair alien technology just by touching it. Grace isn't just hacking their computers anymore. She's rewriting their software at the quantum level. Jake studied the tactical display showing Hegemony positions throughout local space. Hundreds of ships, thousands of installations, millions of enslaved humans. The odds were still impossible, even with their enhanced capabilities. There's something else you should know, Paul said hesitantly. The Hegemony leaders aren't just conquerors. They're terrified of something. I've overheard conversations between guards about threats from beyond the galactic rim. They conquered humanity partly because they needed slave labor, but also because they were building defenses against something worse. What kind of threats? Lisa asked. I don't know the details, but they speak of things that consume entire star systems. ancient enemies that wiped out previous galactic civilizations. The hegemony sees itself as the galaxy's last hope against these forces. Jake felt the cosmic awareness that had been growing stronger since their return pulse with new information. The void between dimensions had shown him glimpses of vast conflicts spanning eons, of civilizations that rose and fell across the galaxy in cycles of destruction and rebirth. "Commander?" Grace Turner called from her station. "I'm intercepting priority communications across the hegemony network. Word of our attacks is spreading. They're mobilizing response fleets." Jake stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars that had once belonged to humanity. The hegemony had made his species into slaves, but they had also awakened something that had been sleeping in the void between dimensions. "How many response fleets?" he asked. "Initial reports indicate 7 battle groups converging on our position. Over 200 ships total." Jake smiled, and there was something in that expression that would have made the hegemony leaders reconsider their strategy if they could have seen it. The enhancement from the void wasn't just making them stronger or smarter. It was connecting them to powers that had shaped the galaxy since before recorded history. "Paul, can you contact the resistance movements in the other labor camps? The networks still exist, but they're scattered and poorly equipped. Tell them to be ready. When we're finished with these response fleets, we're going to give humanity something it hasn't had in 3 centuries. Jake turned back to his crew, seeing the same determination reflected in their enhanced eyes. "We're going to give them hope." The truth came to Dr. Kelly Adams in a moment of perfect clarity as she studied the quantum patterns flowing through the crew's enhanced DNA. She had been running tests for days, trying to understand what the void between dimensions had done to them. When the data finally arranged itself into a picture that took her breath away. "Commander Harrison," she called over the intercom, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "You need to come to the medical bay immediately. All senior officers." Jake found her surrounded by holographic displays showing complex molecular structures that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The rescued prisoners were sleeping in the medical bay's recovery beds, finally getting proper rest after years of forced labor. "What did you find, Doc?" Jake asked as Lisa Bennett, Ryan Cooper, and the other senior officers gathered around. "We're not just enhanced humans anymore," Kelly said, pointing to the spinning DNA helixes on her displays. "The void didn't just change us. It connected us to something vast and ancient. Look at these patterns." The holographic DNA strands were beautiful and terrifying, showing structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal matter should allow. Jake studied them and felt a familiar resonance, like looking at a reflection of something he had always known but never understood. The beings that created the void between dimensions, they weren't just testing us, Kelly continued. They were preparing us. These genetic modifications are designed to unlock abilities that have been dormant in human DNA for millions of years. "What kind of abilities?" Lisa asked. Before Kelly could answer, Grace Turner's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "Commander, the hegemony response fleets have arrived. 237 ships taking position around our location." Jake felt the cosmic awareness expand in his mind as he processed the tactical situation. But this time something was different. Instead of just seeing the enemy positions, he could sense the thoughts and fears of the alien crews. The enhancement was evolving again, connecting him not just to his own ship but to the very fabric of space around them. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. But as the words left his mouth, he realized they weren't necessary. Every crew member was already moving to their positions with perfect coordination. Their enhanced minds linked in ways that made verbal communication almost redundant. Jake made his way to the bridge and found his crew operating their stations with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Amy Johnson sat with her eyes closed. Her consciousness merged completely with the ship's navigation systems. Dan Murphy's hands moved over his weapons console like he was conducting an orchestra of destruction. "Hegemony fleet is moving into attack formation," Dan reported. 7 different species represented, including some ship designs I don't recognize from our databases. "The crystalline vessels," Grace added, her awareness somehow penetrating the alien fleet's communications. "They're called the Architect's Bane. The hegemony found them drifting in deep space and reverse-engineered the technology." Jake felt something cold settle in his enhanced consciousness. The name triggered memories that weren't his own, visions from the void showing ancient conflicts between beings of unimaginable power. The Architects, he said quietly. "The ones who created the testing ground we passed through." "Commander," Paul Martinez called from his position at a secondary station. "I've been studying the historical records we recovered from the transport. The hegemony didn't just conquer humanity for slave labor. They were looking for something specific." "What kind of something?" "Humans with unusual mental capabilities. Psychics, telepaths, people who showed signs of what they called dimensional sensitivity. They've been conducting experiments on captured humans for centuries." The pieces began fitting together in Jake's enhanced mind, with crystalline clarity. The hegemony had enslaved humanity not just for labor, but because they had detected the dormant potential that the architects had placed in human DNA eons ago. They had been trying to artificially trigger the same enhancements that the Void had awakened naturally in his crew. "They know what we are," Jake realized. "They've been trying to create enhanced humans for their own purposes." The hegemony fleet opened fire, hundreds of energy beams converging on the Vengeance's position. But Jake could see each attack before it was launched. His consciousness somehow connected to the quantum fluctuations that preceded energy weapon discharge. "Evasive pattern, Sigma," he ordered, though Amy was already moving the ship through a complex dance that avoided 90% of the incoming fire. The few beams that found their target splashed harmlessly against shields that had grown far beyond their original specifications. "Return fire," Jake said, and Dan's response was devastating. The Vengeance's weapons had evolved during the battle, adapting to counter each type of enemy ship they faced. Energy beams that could cut through hegemony armor like paper, particle weapons that ignored their defensive screens. But the most shocking change was in the crew themselves. Jake could feel their individual consciousnesses linking together, forming a collective awareness that maintained their individual personalities while amplifying their capabilities exponentially. Lisa Bennett wasn't just coordinating tactical responses anymore. She was phasing partially out of normal space-time, her enhanced consciousness existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ryan Cooper had become something more than an engineer, his awareness extending into the ship's systems until he and the Vengeance were becoming a single entity. "Hegemony flagship is attempting to retreat," Grace reported, but her voice carried harmonics that suggested she was speaking with more than human vocal cords. "I'm rewriting their navigation systems. They're not going anywhere." The battle became a demonstration of power that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The Vengeance moved through the enemy fleet like a force of nature, its weapons tearing through formations that should have been able to overwhelm any single vessel. But more importantly, Jake began to understand what they were becoming. The architects who had enhanced them weren't just ancient aliens. They were the survivors of previous galactic civilizations, beings who had transcended physical existence and become something beyond normal matter and energy. They had been waiting for a species with the right combination of adaptability and determination to carry on their legacy. Humanity, with its unique approach to problem-solving and its refusal to accept defeat, had been chosen as their inheritors. "Commander," Dr. Adams called from the medical bay, "the rescued prisoners are showing signs of enhancement too. Proximity to us is triggering dormant genetic modifications in their DNA." Jake smiled as he watched the hegemony fleet scatter before their assault. The alien commanders had made a critical error. By enslaving humanity and conducting their experiments, they had awakened the very force that would ultimately destroy them. "Paul, send word to every resistance cell in the galaxy," Jake ordered. "Tell them the age of human servitude is ending. Tell them their liberators have returned, and we're bringing gifts that will change everything." The Vengeance hung in space, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful fleet the hegemony could assemble. Around them, the stars themselves seemed to pulse with new possibilities, as if the universe itself was awakening to the presence of humanity's transformed children. The hegemony capital world of Veros Prime had never seen a single ship dare to approach its orbital defenses alone. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as they emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, looking out at a fortress that had stood unconquered for over 1,000 years. Massive space stations ringed the planet like artificial moons, each one bristling with weapons that could sterilize continents. Defense fleets patrolled in perfect formations, their combined firepower capable of destroying entire armadas. At the center of it all sat the Hegemony Council chambers, where the leaders of 7 species had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority for centuries. Final scan shows over 800 warships protecting the capital, Amy Johnson reported, Though she no longer needed to speak aloud for the crew to understand her, their consciousness had evolved beyond individual minds, becoming something that existed in multiple dimensions while preserving their human personalities. Ancient defense platforms are powering up, Dan Murphy added, his enhanced awareness detecting weapon systems that had been built by previous galactic civilizations. Energy signatures suggest they're using architect technology. Jake felt a moment of perfect clarity as the cosmic forces that had enhanced them responded to the presence of their creator's ancient weapons. The irony was beautiful and terrible. The hegemony had built their final defense using technology created by the very beings who had chosen humanity as their inheritors. Supreme Commander Zixtar is broadcasting on all channels, Grace Turner reported. He's calling us monsters and promising that humanity will pay for our crimes against galactic order. Jake smiled, remembering the frightened and enslaved humans they had rescued from countless labor camps over the past months. Their campaign across hegemony space had become legendary, each victory inspiring more resistance movements to rise up. Entire sectors were now in open rebellion as enhanced humans led slave populations against their alien masters. Open. A channel to the Hegemony Council, Jake ordered, the main screen filled with the reptilian features of Supreme Commander Zixtar, his yellow eyes burning with hatred and fear. Behind him sat the other hegemony leaders, representatives of species that had ruled the galaxy through conquest and intimidation for generations. Human abomination, Zixtar hissed through his translator. You will surrender immediately or watch your pathetic species burn in nuclear fire. My name is Commander Jake Harrison of Earth, Jake replied calmly. I represent humanity in all its forms, both as we were and as we have become. You enslaved our people for 3 centuries. That ends today. 1 ship against our entire fleet? Zixtar laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You may have acquired strange powers, but you are still only 43 creatures against the might of the hegemony. Jake felt the collective consciousness of his crew pulse with shared determination. Dr. Adams had discovered that their enhancements were no longer individual modifications. They had become something new, a fusion of human consciousness with cosmic forces that existed beyond normal space and time. You're wrong about our numbers, Jake said quietly. We are not 43. We are millions. Across the galaxy, in every labor camp and resistance cell, enhanced humans felt the call. Paul Martinez had spent months coordinating with underground networks, spreading the enhancement to key individuals who could trigger mass awakenings among the enslaved populations. The genetic modifications that lay dormant in human DNA were finally activating on a species-wide scale. The battle for Varos Prime began with a single shot from the Vengeance, but it quickly became something far greater. Jake's crew had transcended individual existence, becoming conduits for forces that had shaped the galaxy since before recorded history. Their ship moved through the enemy fleet like liquid light, reality bending around them as they demonstrated abilities that defied known physics. Lisa Bennett existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, coordinating attacks across probability streams that hadn't occurred yet. Ryan Cooper had merged completely with the Vengeance, his consciousness extending into every system and weapon. The ship itself had evolved far beyond its original design, becoming something that was part machine and part living entity. But the most shocking development came when the ancient defense platforms recognized the crew's connection to the architects. Weapons that had been programmed to destroy any threat to hegemony power turned their guns on their own creator's enemies. The orbital stations began firing on the alien fleet, their loyalty programmed at such a fundamental level that even centuries of hegemony control couldn't override it. Supreme Commander Zixtar abandoned his flagship when it became clear that their defenses had turned against them. He made his way to the planetary surface, where he activated the hegemony's final weapon, a device designed to crack the planet's core and destroy everything within 3 star systems. Jake felt the weapon powering up through his enhanced consciousness and made a decision that would have been impossible for an unmodified human. He separated his awareness from his physical body and descended to the planet's surface as pure consciousness, moving through matter like it was empty space. The confrontation between Jake Harrison and Supreme Commander Zixtar took place in the Hegemony Council chambers, where centuries of enslaved species had pleaded for mercy that never came. But Jake was no longer the human commander who had chased an alien scout ship through a dimensional rift centuries ago. He had become something that existed in harmony with cosmic forces, a being of enhanced matter and transcendent consciousness. "Your weapon won't work," Jake told the reptilian leader as Zixtar's clawed hand hovered over the activation controls. "The architects built safeguards into their technology. It recognizes us as their chosen inheritors." "Impossible," Zixtar snarled, pressing the activation sequence. "Humans are an inferior species. Weak, short-lived, limited by your primitive biology." The planet killer device powered up for a moment, then shut down completely as its architect-designed components recognized Jake's enhanced nature. Instead of destroying Veros Prime, it began broadcasting a signal across the galaxy, a message that had been waiting for millions of years to be transmitted. The signal reached every world where humans lived in slavery, activating dormant enhancements in millions of people simultaneously. Across the galaxy, the enslaved rose up with abilities that made them more than equal to their former masters. Jake stood in the ruins of the Hegemony Council chambers, looking down at Supreme Commander Zixtar, who had collapsed in terror at the realization that his species' reign of dominance was ending. Through his enhanced consciousness, Jake could sense the liberation of human populations across hundreds of worlds, the collapse of the slave economy that had sustained the hegemony for centuries. "What are you?" Zixtar whispered. Jake considered the question seriously. He was no longer entirely human in the traditional sense, but he had never stopped being human where it mattered most. The enhancement from the void between dimensions had revealed humanity's true potential, but it hadn't changed the core values that made his species worth saving. "We are what we always were," Jake said finally. "We are the species that refuses to kneel, that adapts to any challenge, that grows stronger when faced with impossible odds. You tried to make us into slaves, but instead you awakened something that will reshape the galaxy." The hegemony surrendered within days, their military forces scattered and their political structure in collapse. Jake Harrison and the crew of the Vengeance had become the architects of a new galactic order, one where humans took their place not as conquerors but as protectors of all free species. But perhaps most importantly, they remained recognizably human despite their cosmic enhancements, using their godlike abilities to ensure that the cycle of oppression and slavery would never repeat itself across the stars.